Tonight, how can one of the most high-profile inmates in federal custody manage to kill himself? A former federal prosecutor joins us to look at that and all the other questions surrounding Jeffrey Epstein. Then we'll speak with Congresswoman Nita Lowey about gun control. The New York Democrat will tell us how her caucus is trying to get common-sense gun legislation passed. And as states consider legalizing marijuana, tonight, part one of my special report on how recreational marijuana is impacting one particular community. I speak with the mayor, customers, neighbors, and more. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard French. We begin tonight with new questions surrounding the death of accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. The FBI and Justice Department are on the case, investigating his reported suicide while he was in federal custody in Manhattan. Accusations of a security breakdown after the apparent suicide of accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein inside a Manhattan jail cell.
It should never happen in this particular jail. So there are going to be questions.
His death by hanging is under investigation by the FBI and the Inspector General.
Heads are going to roll in one way or another.
And Attorney General William Barr is promising to uncover the truth.
This case will continue on against anyone who was complicit with Epstein.
According to sources, guards were supposed to check on Epstein every 30 minutes, but did not in the hours before he was discovered Saturday morning. The Metropolitan Correctional Center has been understaffed, leading to low morale among guards. And the two guards in the special housing unit where Epstein was kept were both on overtime. One of the guards on his fifth overtime shift of the week.
For there to be criminal charges, you're going to need intentional acts, not just negligence.
Epstein's death comes less than 24 hours after 2,000 pages of new court documents related to a 2015 defamation case against an Epstein associate were made public, including depositions and police reports.
You're screaming on the inside and you don't know how to let it come out. All you do is obey.
In those unsealed documents, Virginia Roberts Guffrey's 2015 testimony, she claims she was a teenage sex slave to Epstein and that he directed her to have sex with powerful men. And as usual, Donald Trump is right in the middle of a controversy surrounding the death of Epstein. The president retweeting a conspiracy theory from a comedian and conservative commentator named Terrence Williams. Here's part of the video attached to that tweet.
He had information on the Clintons, and the man ended up dead. Now, for some odd reason, people that have information on the Clintons end up dead.
That is one of many conspiracy theories about Epstein. They're coming from both sides, but that's the one getting the most attention, thanks to the commander-in-chief. And joining us now to discuss, former federal prosecutor Roland Riopelle. Roland, always good to see you. Let's start with the fact that Epstein was being held at the Metropolitan Correction Center when he died of an apparent suicide. I know you've had clients there. Did the news surprise you?
Right. It did, Andrew, because, you know, a client that is this high profile typically gets a lot of attention and extra attention. And Mr. Epstein was able to commit suicide here because he didn't get the attention that even a normal inmate in the special housing unit gets, namely being checked on regularly. So it is surprising that he died. I will say that it's not uncommon for inmates to commit suicide. Indeed, the suicide rate of federal prisoners is higher than that of the general population. But at a place like the MCC, which is highly secure and typically, particularly in the special housing unit, you know, very well monitored, it is surprising that Mr. Epstein was able to kill himself.
Well, it strikes me, Roland, that when it comes to Epstein, the guards either intentionally gave him the room to kill himself or to have someone kill him, or were just sloppy and accidentally gave him the room to kill himself or have someone kill him. I don't know if from your experience with the place and with clients there, if you would know which you would think is more likely.
I think based on my experience, it's more likely that Epstein did commit suicide and the guards were simply not monitoring him as often as one would expect in a situation like this. It is true that the MCC, particularly in the last year or two, has been woefully understaffed, and it is not uncommon for lawyers trying to go visit their clients to have grave difficulty getting in to see their clients because there are just not enough guards there to monitor everyone. So that is the theory I would adopt now, that this was the result of negligence rather than any ill will on the part of the guards. But time will tell. Mr. Barr is going to do a thorough investigation, and I'm sure he'll report on what he finds.
Final question about the MCC before we shift over to what happens now. Epstein was on suicide watch and then apparently was taken off suicide watch. To your knowledge, it's supposed to be the mental health professionals who make that call, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And if he was taken off suicide watch, I would expect there to be a record and a report by a certified medical professional opining that Mr. Epstein was no longer a risk to himself. Without that report, it would be extremely unusual. Indeed, it would be wrong for him to be taken off suicide watch. So I think there will be such a report.
A lot of people are, of course, saying, well, look, Jeffrey Epstein was a scumbag, so who cares? But lest we forget, Epstein wasn't the only one there pre-trial, which means it's a pretty good chance that there are some innocent people at the MCC as well. I wonder, should we be taking a wider lesson, not just about Epstein, but about how we generally hold people before trial?
Yes, I think that the conditions in which people are held, and particularly at the MCC and the MDC, which had some electrical problems just a few months ago, can be really inhumane. And the MCC is a very old jail. It's not in the best of shape. It's not kept up that well. And it's a crummy place to have to do time. And it's depressing. And so it's not surprising to me that an inmate like Mr. Epstein would get depressed and ultimately kill himself. And really, we should be thinking about ways to keep our pretrial detainees fully monitored, but outside a jail cell in most cases.
All right, so let's move from the jail now back to the courtroom. The case against Epstein, we've had two warnings, one from the U.S. Attorney and one from Attorney General Barr, saying that this is a conspiracy case and Epstein's conspirators, quoting Barr, should not rest easy. So where does the case go from here? And I keep wondering, Roland, if this is a conspiracy, shouldn't other people, including Epstein's aide, Ghislaine Maxwell, who Epstein's victims have called his recruiter, shouldn't they already be in jail or facing charges if this is a conspiracy?
Well, remember, I think Ms. Maxwell is overseas somewhere, and the U.S. government may not even know exactly where she is. To bring someone back from overseas, you'd have to extradite her, and that is a lengthy and difficult process. So to the extent Mr. Epstein's co-conspirators, if they are co-conspirators, are overseas, it's going to be a long time before they come back and face justice. Anyone here in the States who worked with Mr. Epstein to commit a crime will be looked at by the Department of Justice, and if evidence can be developed that the DOJ believes will prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, then sure, they're going to bring charges against him. And it does appear that there were a number of people who worked very closely with Mr. Epstein to commit what are likely crimes. And those individuals should be concerned, because I do think the Department of Justice is going to try to run down all the facts as to them, just as it was running down the facts with respect to Mr. Epstein.
Epstein's alleged victims will now never have a chance to get justice. They'll never be able to see Jeffrey Epstein in prison or even in a courtroom. But there is financial justice that's possible in all of this, and he left a huge estate, or at least we think he did. Does his death complicate the financial settlements or the financial attempts to seek justice? Is it harder to parse through his estate now that he's dead than it would have been when he was still alive?
Not too much more difficult. With the death of a criminal defendant, any criminal financial penalties like a criminal forfeiture or an order of restitution, those remedies all disappear when a criminal defendant dies and a case is still pending. But any civil remedies, any lawsuits that victims have brought or might bring will survive, and they can pursue those lawsuits against Mr. Epstein's estate. They may not be able to sue him personally, but his estate would be substituted in his stead in every civil case already brought against him. And if there are future civil cases, those could be brought against his estate as well. And as you note, Andrew, his estate seems to be pretty large, and so there may well be money there to pay to many of his victims.
Very quickly, Roland, are you worried at all about Attorney General Barr's role in all this, especially since he seems to be mucking up the Mueller stuff?
Not yet. I mean, let's wait and see how it plays out, Andrew. You know, he seems very interested in pursuing the case and going where the evidence leads. I'm not going to disparage Attorney General Barr in this context until I see some evidence that he's trying to hide the ball or shave off the evidence as to Mr. Trump or misrepresent it as he did in the Mueller case. If we see that, then it's time to worry.
A judicious position. Finally, we typically turn to you on Trump and Russia developments. Let's keep that streak going. Last week, Jerry Nadler filed suit to get Don McGahn to try to testify before Congress. He also called it an impeachment inquiry. Is it, and what does that label change? And do you think he'll succeed in getting McGahn in his chamber?
I think, you know, calling it an impeachment inquiry ups the stakes, makes it more serious as a legal matter. It's not just oversight. It's now an impeachment inquiry. That's the most significant thing, really, that the Judiciary Committee can be doing. And so it'll get everybody's attention, including the courts, even more than it otherwise would. Do I think Mr. Nadler will get Mr. McGahn into the Judiciary Committee? I do. I think that a subpoena to Mr. McGahn will be enforced. I think Mr. Trump's strategy now is to draw it out, drag your feet, make everything take longer than it should, so that at some point, not too far in the distant future, he can make the claim to at least his base that these proceedings are really intended simply to damage him politically in connection with the upcoming election. I think it's a little early for that argument now, but by delaying things, that's the argument Mr. Trump, I think, is trying to set up.
Former federal prosecutor Roland Riopelle. Roland, don't worry, I'll take you tie shopping at some point soon. We'll get that all straightened out. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
All right. And up next here on RFL, the chairwoman of the powerful House Appropriations Committee joins us to discuss gun control and what Democrats will do next. After the break, Nita Lowy joins us.